Hi, welcome back to the channel. So today's video is going to be all about how to increase your test scores quickly and effectively. I made a video about this a few years ago, and to this day, I get DMs from people, questions, and comments about that video. So I wanted to do a step-by-step guide on exactly how to make your practice exam scores jump higher and quicker. For those of you who are new, my name is Monica. I finished my third year of medical school a few months ago. I took step 2 and I'm currently in my research year. I also make content for pre-meds and med students that helps them navigate the field of medicine. So if that's something that you're interested in, make sure you subscribe to this channel. With that said, let's get right into this video. So if you're in a situation where you're not really seeing your practice exam scores jump as high as you want them to, or you're kind of seeing them plateau, or worse, you're seeing them dip, the biggest reason for this is because you're not reviewing your practice questions or your practice exams the right way. But by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to review your practice questions and practice exams so that your scores jump higher and quicker. Because if you're anything like me, no part of you wants to elongate your dedicated period for the MCAT, step 1, step 2 for longer than it needs to be. This is the number one strategy that helped me score well on the MCAT, pass step 1, and score well on step 2. And I'm going to show you in this video exactly how I did it. So let's get started. So step number 1, you want to take your practice exams and practice question blocks in exam-like conditions. While this helps build exam stamina, a bigger reason to do this is because it's the most effective way of getting an accurate baseline for where you're at. So at this stage, your goal isn't to get everything right. It is just to understand where you're at with your practice questions or your practice exam. Step number 2. Once the test is done or your practice question block is done, you don't want to wait to review your answers. You want to ideally do this within the first 24 to 48 hours. And take it from me, as someone who spent way too long reviewing her practice exams, don't be me. Do them as quickly as possible. If it's practice question blocks, you want to ideally do them that day, or if it's practice exams, which are longer, within 24 to 48 hours. Step number 3, now you'll identify all the questions that you got wrong, and you'll develop a system for exactly how to analyze your incorrects.
I used an Excel sheet, and this is an example for when I was studying for the MCAT. So as you can see on the bottom, I had multiple tabs, and this was just a way for me to keep track of what resource I was using, and had a particular way of organizing the information within a tab. So the first column was just a way for me to keep track of what questions I was missing in a section. I wouldn't say this was a super necessary column. The second column, though, is very important. This is where I would identify what question I got wrong, and then I would tag it based on one of 3 categories. These categories were, the first one was content gap, and this is for questions where I had a lack of understanding or knowledge about a topic. The second category was misinterpretation, and this is for questions where I misunderstood the question stem or answer choice. And then lastly, it was carelessness, and this is where I was either overlooking details or misreading a question or not paying attention to some aspect or the other about the question. The next column was just a way for me to jot down some notes about a question. I'm not sure how necessary this column was either, but I have it. But the last column is incredibly important, and this is where you identify the content topic for the question that you missed. So what you're going to do is that at the end of your review of a question block or a practice exam, you're going to have a list of content topics based on the questions that you missed. And you're going to use these topics to do your content review. So whenever you set aside time for content review during the week, you'll use this column as a blueprint to dictate where you're going to be learning during that time.
The biggest reason why you do this is because it helps you understand patterns in your own way of thinking and where you're going wrong. It is so important to understand how your own brain works, which is why you can't just look at a list of questions and their answers and then just figure out from there how to do well on an exam. It really depends on understanding where your content gaps are, how your brain is thinking about these questions, and then filling in those gaps. I get a lot of questions from people who ask me, how do I do content review? What are the best resources for content review? The best way to approach content review, especially if you have limited amount of time, to start with practice questions and then to work backwards to fill in the gaps for your knowledge.
So as you're doing content review and you're learning the topic, depending on what works for you, you can either use Anki or Word document to help you retain the most important information.
Now here's where most people get tripped up, because the question always becomes, so what do I write down? What is the most important? So I'm going to walk you through exactly what you should write down in your Word document or make Anki flashcards out of, but not to write. Everything under the sun. You do not want these to be long. You do not want these to be paragraphs of information which are hard to get through. You want these to be very succinct and short. So what to write: short, concise statements that act as a memory trigger for the overarching concept and what will help you answer the question. Those are the two criteria that you have to check mark before it can go in your Word document or your Anki flashcard. It is so easy to get caught in the weeds or to feel like you need to write down entire long explanations, to even fly off on a tangent of another part of the concept that you also don't understand. But the way to ground yourself here is to always tie it back to the question. What is one piece of information or two pieces of information that you learned during your content review stage that would have helped you answer the question? Step number 6, how often should you be reviewing your document or your flashcards? You want to review this content every single day. Now, if you're using Anki, it will kind of take care of the spaced repetition for you. If you went the Word document route, what I would recommend is setting aside 30 minutes every single day to review your document. Now, I already know I'm going to get questions about this because people are going to be like, okay, my document is 30 pages long. How do I review this in 30 minutes? The point of those 30 minutes isn't to get through your whole document. It is to do as much review as possible in those 30 minutes. So when you're reviewing your document, set a timer for 30 minutes, review as much as you can. The next day, you start off from where you left off until you get to the end of the document and then you start over. The number one reason for why the strategy works is because it involves a lot of active learning. If you're just reading explanations as to why you got a question incorrect or the answer choices and what they all mean, it's a very passive form of learning, and a lot of times you don't get a lot out of it, and it increases your chances of making the same mistake again. What you're doing with the strategy is essentially ensuring that you don't repeat the same mistakes as often. The second reason for why the strategy works is because you're making targeted error corrections. You get a question wrong, it's highlighting where your own content gaps are. You get a question wrong, it highlights a specific knowledge gap or a faulty thought process that you have. By tagging the question for why exactly you got it wrong, you develop an understanding of your own brain and how you think about these questions. The strategy helps you to not just waste your time looking at things that you already know. Instead, helps you focus and prioritize the things that you're weak at. So just remember, each time you do this, you reduce the likelihood of repeating your mistakes. This brings us to the end of this video. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.